This is Barry Zalma on insurance. I am an attorney who has retired from the active practice of law and now spend my time as an insurance claims consultant, an insurance claims expert, witness, an author, and producer of these videos. Today I'd like to talk about bodily injury allegedly caused by mold or fungi. A book, quote, "The Guidance for Clinicians on Recognition and Management of Health Effects Related to Mold Exposure and Moisture Indoors." The Guidance is one of the most recent studies of the effects of mold in the environment and its effect on human health when combined with other causes. The authors of the guidance found that there is strong evidence that significant disease can result from dampness and fungi in the home or workplace. However, it also recognizes that dust mites in damped environments explain some of the relationship between dampness and respiratory symptoms. The causal relationship between the damp environment and health symptoms, including respiratory symptoms, headache, fatigue, and recurrent infections, is less understood. Mold seems to represent a part of the explanation. The guidance focused its analysis on the effect of mold in the indoor environment and the relationship between exposure to mold and mold spores on occupants of that environment. After reviewing case studies, the guidance reported that fungi can cause disease in humans and animals by a variety of biological mechanisms, which can be classified into 4 groups. 1. Infections. 2. Allergic or hypersensitivity reactions. 3. Irritant reactions. And 4. Toxic reactions. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, in response to an inquiry from the public concerning the hazards of toxic mold, said, quote, "The term toxic mold is not accurate. While certain molds are toxigenic, meaning they can produce toxins, specifically mycotoxins, the molds themselves are not toxic or poisonous. Hazards presented by molds that may produce mycotoxins should be considered the same as other common molds which can grow in your house. There is always a little mold everywhere, in the air and on many surfaces. There are very few toxigenic molds, and there are very few reports that toxigenic molds found inside homes can cause unique or rare health conditions such as pulmonary hemorrhage or memory loss. These case reports are rare, and a causal link between the presence of the toxigenic mold and these conditions has not been proven." Close quote. In addition, the CDC found that a possible association between acute idiopathic pulmonary hemorrhage among infants and Stachybotrys chatum has not been proved. The CDC believes that further studies are needed. It is difficult, therefore, for any expert to support a causal relationship between exposure to mold, even the much maligned Stachybotrys chatum, and illness in humans. Mold has been implicated as a cause of hypersensitivity pneumonitis, an inflammation of the lungs due to breathing in a foreign substance, usually certain types of dust, fungus, or molds. It usually occurs in those who work in places where there are high levels of organic dusts, fungus, or molds. Repeated or intense exposure to dust from moldy hay, straw, and grain can lead to lung inflammation and acute lung disease. Over time, this acute condition may turn into a long-lasting chronic lung disease. The condition may also result from fungus present in humidifiers, heating systems, and air conditioners found in homes and offices. Exposure to certain bird droppings, for example, among bird owners, can also lead to hypersensitivity pneumonitis. Scientific studies reveal some disease functions, but they are not totally convincing. Some of the disease functions the guidance indicates can result from mold exposure include fungal infections, allergic rhinitis, asthma, hypersensitivity pneumonitis, extrinsic allergic alveolitis, interstitial lung disease, bronchopulmonary aspergillosis, allergic fungal sinusitis, allergic dermatitis, irritant symptoms, organic dust syndrome, and pulmonary hemorrhage in infants. The guidance states, quote, "We recognize the medical community has not agreed on what conditions and even what types of diseases could be classified as mold-related illness," close quote. The authors of the guidance also noted, quote, "the potential role of bacterial agents, dust mites, and pests associated with moisture in buildings should not be ignored." The authors suggested that clinicians faced with a patient who may have adverse exposure to mold should ask the following questions. 1. What is your current occupation? 2. What are your current job tasks? 3. Do you associate your symptoms with any activity or hobby? 4. Are you exposed to chemicals, fumes, or dusts at work? 5. Are there areas of your home or work that have recurrent moisture problems? The guidance goes on to state, quote, "Often the most powerful diagnostic strategy is to evaluate the patient before and after exposure to the environment of concern. When the etiology of a condition is unknown and the individual is working or living in the environment of concern, judicious trials away from and back in the environment allow the physician and the patient to evaluate the likelihood that a job or home is playing a role in an illness. Such trials should be coupled with careful measurement of pertinent physical exam, laboratory, or physiologic parameters. Bracketed spirometry, for example, involves spirometry after at least 2 full days away from the environment, and again after exposure, usually at the end of the same day or after the onset of symptoms. Serial peak flow measurements obtained at least 4 times a day for 2 consecutive weeks may assist in evaluating physiologic response to an environment, close quote. The guidance concludes that there is no consensus in the scientific medical literature regarding toxic effects of mold as encountered by humans in non-industrial, non-farm, indoor environments. The toxic effects of environmental agents lead to the conclusion that the toxicologist faces significant problems as compared to the pharmacologist in terms of quantifying the relationship between the agent, the mold, and the response, the illness. Those studying the problem face multiple disadvantages. For example, the concentration of the toxic agent is usually unknown when the effects are first seen. Ex post facto estimations of these exposure concentrations are often a limitation of the science, even if good analytic techniques for the toxin are available. Moreover, the subjects of a toxicologist's inquiries are often unusual responses, which occur in sensitive populations or sensitive members of a given population at or near the threshold concentrations for the biological effects of the toxin or chemical. Significant uncertainty exists, therefore, in the development of dose-response curves for many toxic substances. In view of these limitations, toxicologists who develop permissible levels or reference doses for general population exposures to chemicals with known toxic effects routinely build in large safety factors. Proving cause and effect relationships for clinical diseases potentially resulting from mycotoxins has additional limitations. There are no standardized methods for qualitative or quantitative analysis of airborne mycotoxins in the indoor or the outdoor environment. There are few known biomarkers for measuring exposure to these toxins. The guidance clearly outlines the uncertainty of current knowledge, calls for further research to clarify exposures, pathologic responses, and mechanisms of injury. There is inadequate or insufficient information to establish an association of Stachybotrys chartarum and the appropriate assessment of homes with water damage. Simply stated, mold can possibly cause injury, but there is no definitive evidence that it does so. At best, if a person is allergic to the mold and whatever toxins it might send out with its spores, the solution is for that allergic person to remove himself from the spores. I am personally allergic to many foods, and my allergist told me the only cure was to avoid those foods. So I don't eat eggs as much as would love to. The exposure from molds causes difficulties. It is not necessarily toxic. It is a problem that can be resolved, but it is not possible for an expert, a toxicologist, to testify without a great deal of study and evaluation of the individual that an individual was caused bodily injury as a result of exposure to mold or mold spores. This video was adapted from my newest book, The Mold and Fungi Handbook, which is available from Amazon.com as both a Kindle book called The Zalma's Mold and Fungi Handbook and a paperback, The Mold and Fungi Handbook. You can also find out about the books through my website, zalma.com, by clicking on the link to the insurance claims library. If you found this video of interest, please forward it to your colleagues. If you wish to learn about more from me and from my videos and blog posts and the insurance and insurance law issues, please subscribe to my blog at zalma.com/blog. Thank you again for your attention.